Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming and a request video from Richard, which I'm going to tie into Monster Kingdom somehow, because I'm wearing the Vendrew pin, and also because we are approaching the end of our crowdfunding campaign, so if you haven't backed it yet, I would really appreciate if you did. Let's hit as many stretch goals as possible. The link to the crowdfunding campaign is in the video description below. Richard sent me an email following purchasing one of my books in hardback. I believe it was Monster Kingdom in this case. Asking, I was wondering if you would be interested in doing a video about what it is exactly, in your professional opinion, that makes a good tabletop RPG from both a storyteller or a game master perspective, but also a player. Which aspects of a system do each group truly care about in a system? Perhaps give some examples from your vast experience with the subject. Richard. Well, thank you very much for the request, Richard, and thank you very much for the purchase. Whenever someone purchases a book and requests a video, I really do appreciate it, especially when it's one of these books of mine. The World Below, Monster Kingdoms, very important games to me, not least because Monster Kingdoms is crowdfunding right now, and The World Below is one I actually make money off of on every single sale. So if you want to support me, pick up a copy of The World Below. If you want to support my my prospects in the gaming industry, pick up Monster Kingdoms, because the active concern. This is indeed a subjective take. Naturally, this is my opinion, and it may well differ to yours. And what I would really be interested in before I go anywhere with this video is you saying in the comments below what you think makes a good RPG. What makes a good tabletop RPG from the GM's perspective, and also the players. Which aspects of a system matter? What do they care about? Well, rule number one as a game designer and as a GM and as a player is the game needs to have a system that is either complementary to the setting, to the story you're trying to tell, or is not intrusive to the setting and the story you're trying to tell. It's sometimes easier to use examples of bad cases where the rules really slow down play. A game I enjoy, but has a system like this, is Shadowrun, for example. Shadowrun has been the punching bag in many ways to this kind of accusation for a long time, but I would extend that to combat in storytelling, in the storyteller or storytelling system. V5 does some work, or 5th edition World of Darkness does some work to minimize that, but ultimately, just like the dice pool system for things like decking and the fact that decking even exists, it's less of a problem now than it was in the first 3 editions of Shadowrun. But combat in the World of Darkness always felt like you have to calculate to hit, you have to calculate to damage, you have to calculate to soak, you have to all this. And by the end of it, you may not have done any damage to your opponent. That can be a real hazard and is arguably a symptom of not great game design, but is the effect is on the players, because the players find it such a grind, and the effect is on the storyteller, because when I'm trying to run one of these games, I try to avoid combat as much as possible so that I don't have to go through that rigmarole. Interestingly, Slay Industries, which is a game, the system for which came under fire when it was first released because of its granularity, I find is a system that actually complements the kind of story Slay Industries is trying to tell, where you roll initiative for every single person present, and then the slowest announces what they're going to do, second slowest announces, third slowest, fourth slowest, fastest. Let's say there's 5 characters there. So we start with the slowest, we end with the fastest, because the fastest is going to act based on what all the slower people are going to do. So now that we've had our announcements, the fastest acts, and everyone else is locked into their action, or they take penalties to change their action. This makes for a pretty slow combat system, because you've got to do this every single round. And Slay Industries can get even more granular, and this system is used across various of Nightfall games. The system can be quite granular. It appears in Stokerverse. I think it's in the Terminator RPG as well. but I think it really sells the setting. It sells the lethality of combat. It sells the rare commodity that is bullets, because you are having to time every single shot, and bullets cost a lot of money in Slay Industries. So there is a benefit to that. That is a case where a system, even though it feels, let's call it crunchy, is actually working in service to the game itself. And you can get cases like that with like the 2d20 system that Modifius uses. The system, for example, for the Conan RPG, which is now discontinued, but 2d20 has been used for a variety of their games, while presented poorly across the Conan books. For whatever reason, Modifius never quite got the hang of laying it out in a way that made it easily understandable. Once you get it, once you understand the 2d20 system, you actually find yourself playing a game that is very fluid, where combat is crunchy and hard, and it feels like you are a legendary champion. You just have to take a while to understand it. So when we're talking about what makes a good game system, for me, a system that really sells what you're trying to do is always worthwhile. On the subject of Monster Kingdoms and all of the Story Path Ultra games, what I love about a system is a system that rewards you for every single success you roll. In a dice pool system, for example, this is something Shadowrun never used to do. Storytelling still don't do. Story Path is very, very good. Story Path Ultra is very good in that if I roll 4 hits on my attack, and I only need to get 1 to beat the difficulty of his defense, those other 3 aren't wasted. I can use that one to trip him up. I can use these 2 to disarm him, because tricks in the game are purchasable with hits. So you roll your number of hits, and you use them to whatever effect you choose. That is a really good system for me. Again, there's a question of presentation. All of the tricks available should be presented in one place, which is what we're doing with Monster Kingdoms, for example. All of the tricks in one appendix at the back of the book, so you can easily navigate to it. You can print it off. You can put it in the middle of your table so everyone can reference it nice and easy. That's a very important part of game design as well. Much as I was saying with the 2d20 system, it's a really fun system, but it's spread out all over the place in a rather unintuitive way. The same with Pendragon in a fashion, because you've got part of the system for the latest edition in the player's guide and part in the GM handbook. Once they work, they can be great fun. But from a design standpoint, they need to be in a single place. Part of that is something we've been learning as we go with Onyx Path and Story Path Ultra. Obviously, we know that the tricks need to be accessible, or stunts in Story Path, but we never knew, I would say, this is my opinion, how much fun or how many people would really be using them all the time. And therefore, you had your attack tricks here, your defense tricks a couple of pages over, your investigation tricks 6 pages later. It turns out people love these tricks in Story Path Ultra, so they need them all in one place. So part of it, as a game designer, is less intuitive, it's more learned. But that takes me to non-intrusive systems, because sometimes you want a system that just sort of glides along, that is just facilitating play but isn't necessarily flashy. I don't like systems with custom dice as a general rule, where you need to roll this many lightsabers and this many force points and this many darks and things like that. I don't want to have to roll different dice with different symbols on for grenades, for example, for splash damage, even though in some games that can really lend itself to what you're doing. This is a difference for me between RPGs and skirmish games, for example. A skirmish game, I like to have that tactile, okay, I'm using my explosives now, so let's get the explosive dice out. But in an RPG, I want everything to be as fluid as possible. I don't want the system to interfere with the game unless it is making the game well, better if it's serving the game, enhancing its setting, its feeling. In the world below, for example, we have chaotic retaliations as almost an after effect of using a sorcery. When you cast a sorcery, as mentioned, Story Path Ultra, you need to hit the difficulty, and then if you have scored additional hits, congratulations, you can start buying off the chaotic retaliation, or you can buy tricks to make your sorcery even stronger. You could do both if you get enough hits, but most people are only going to be able to do one or the other. So chaotic retaliation, you go to some tables, you roll some dice. Oh no, this is the environmental hazard that's just appeared because the sorceries are unpredictable in the world below. In Monster Kingdoms, you have crowns that fulfill a similar function to sorceries without the chaotic retaliation. Instead, they get more and more devastating the more hits you pour into them. That, for me, is good game design because it means, yes, you're rewarding the players for rolling. It makes your powers feel powerful. It makes you end up looking at systems such as the D&D systems that are still so arbitrary, swingy. 1d20 is a very swingy die. I mean, it is the biggest swing die there is, unless you're including 1d100s. But I think that then you, let's say, cast a spell and it's magic missile, and oh well, congratulations, I've done 2d4 plus 2 damage. That doesn't have a great deal of impact. So clearly, some of that's going to come down to a GM narration, but that isn't how it's presented in D&D. Pathfinder 2nd Edition does it very, very well. It gets it a lot better. It's a lot more descriptive. But Dungeons and Dragons has always been a lot more by the numbers. And I think that's why it's accessible. I'm not suggesting it's a bad game. A lot of people play D&D because they want to get in with the game as mathematically approachable as it can be. They don't need to worry about narrative. They don't need to worry about this many hits does this many things or anything like that. They just see, cast this spell, this damage. Swing this sword, this damage. Straightforward, easy, simple, done. And when you're first getting into an RPG, sometimes just seeing the numbers is enough for you. But as a game designer, I'm looking for things that are going to attract other people. I want to tell interesting stories. I want to enable interesting stories. And that's why I really enjoy Story Path Ultra. But I also really enjoy the percentile systems of Eclipse Phase, of Call of Cthulhu, of Haunted West, and I think that there's a lot of fun to be had with degrees of success. So Eclipse Phase is very interesting for this. You have to, I think, take the time to memorize it, but or just note it in front of you on a cheat sheet. But things like if you roll and hit your skill number, that's absolutely fantastic. If you get double digits above or double digits below, that's either great or bad, and so on. That is a variation, if you like, on percentile in the way Call of Cthulhu, for example, or basic role-playing has your skill threshold. If you need to get a regular success, you just need to roll under your skill. If you need to get a hard success, you need to roll under half of your skill. If you need to get an extreme success, you need to get under a fifth of your skill. And there's still the possibility of critical fails and successes at either end of the 100 spectrum. And I don't consider D100s quite as swingy as 1D20 because it isn't a binary pass or fail. Because you've got these degrees of success in these games, it makes the dice roll more interesting. It has more impact again, and for me, that makes for a good system. The best thing, though, I think about Call of Cthulhu from a game design standpoint isn't the sanity system, as a lot of people say. I think sanity attracts a lot of people to Call of Cthulhu, but it is the luck system. And it couldn't be simpler, but it is one of my favourite systems in an RPG. You start off with X number of luck equal to, I think, 3d6 plus 6. You roll it at the start of the game. And after that, in fact, I think it's over 3d6. It's 3d6 plus 3d6 times 5, I want to say. Sorry. Anyway, Anyway, yeah, it would be 2d6 plus 6 times 5 or 3d6 times 5. Anyway, you've got X number of points. So when you roll in Call of Cthulhu, let's say you fail, you could spend 1 luck to push your luck and roll again. If you fail your re-roll, it becomes a critical failure. So you have pushed your luck and failed badly. Or you can spend the amount of luck you need to turn your failure into a success. So let's say your skill rating is 50, you roll a 70. If you spend 20 luck in 1 hit, congratulations, you now succeed, but you're down 20 luck. Sometimes that big difference maker is what you need to outrun the Shoggoth that's chasing after you. Luck, for me, even though it is an incredibly simple mechanic, is even better at evoking the horror of Call of Cthulhu than sanity. I love saying to a player, I'm afraid you run out of luck when they hit 0. Running out of luck is such a visceral description for me, I think. If you've had an investigator who's been using up all their luck, because it's a good narrative arc, they've been lucky, they've been lucky, they've been lucky, oh no, they've run out of luck, means a lot more than, oh no, they've run out of sanity. Because now they are purely down to the whims of dice. They have 0 luck left, it is just dice rolls, let's see whether they can get out of this one. And watching players negotiate how much luck they're prepared to spend on a given task is, for me, a lot of fun. This is where the tension lies in Call of Cthulhu, not with sanity, not with hit points, it's with the luck currency mechanic, and I think that's an excellent game mechanic. Compare it, let's say, to something like just, you get 1 free re-roll session mechanics in other games. That's not interesting. I like currencies in games, just like I like blood points in Vampire the Masquerade. I think that especially if you can make it tangible on the table, if you're playing in person, having red beads for your blood points, for example, you will start seeing people spend them a lot more, but you'll also see people paying attention to them a lot more. So, yeah, good game design, and for players and GMs, I find it synonymous, really. I think a system's got to work for both parties for it to be workable, for it to be a good system. And there's so many games with fantastic systems. And there's games with great bespoke systems as well. Locus, Bluebeard's Bride, of course, is a pretty much wholly narrative game. You have fantastically experimental systems out there. I was talking not long ago about how the Shadow system in Wraith the Oblivion is an experimental system by 90s standards, and these days, everyone is doing that kind of thing, where you have another player playing your Shadow. That sold the setting of Wraith the Oblivion perfectly, but arguably hamstrung the game because not everyone trusted the other players at the table to not just be dickheads to each other. I wouldn't say it's the biggest fault in Wraith, which is my favourite World of Darkness game, but it isn't its best point. For me, I think the storyteller should play the Shadow just like they play every other NPC in the game. But anyway, I think you can have these great mechanics that sell games, but sometimes they might overcomplicate things, or they might ruin someone's play. If we're talking about Shadows, for example, or if we're expecting players to turn up with specific kinds of dice, but I don't mean D4s through to D20s, but I mean, dice with funny icons on. I'm not fond of those kind of gimmicks myself, really. I think a good system is simple, ideally, or non-intrusive, or really sells the setting. If you can do all 3 of those, and that's one of the reasons I really enjoy working on Storypath Ultra games and basic role-playing games, because D10 dice pools, every hit means something, is a brilliant selling point for me. D100 system with a luck currency and degrees of success is a brilliant system for me. I like both of these things a lot. I'm not as fond of swingy, arbitrary mathematics systems or systems where every character has their own little sheet about how to play their character and things like that. That's less interesting to me. Anyway, that is my take on it. Thank you very much for watching. Do pick up a copy of Monster Kingdoms if you haven't already. It's in the video description below, and I will see you next time.